And with that, let's get started. So hello, hopefully everyone can hear me. Uh, if not, this will be pretty quick. So welcome to the WebXam Users Workshop. This is the first of a series of workshops this year. We're going to be focusing on updates and uploads. As I said, we'll be doing a series of these. Sadly, they won't all alliterate as nicely as updates and uploads. So I am Richard Huggins, IT and WebXam Service Delivery Lead, and then joining me is Brock Hertzfeld, who will be talking about uploads. So first off, before we dive into the updates for the year, I did want to talk briefly about what WebXam is. It's an online testing portal used by career tech education and FCS programs throughout Ohio as part of an agreement with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce Office of Career Tech. Students participate in end-of-course testing in CTE and FCS if needed for graduation. Under the competency-based model. We deliver those tests to students in those qualifying CTE and FCS programs. The tests we deliver are aligned with the Ohio Department of Educational Workforce's career field content standards, and those content standards also determine when tests are rewritten. So as the standards are rewritten, new tests are written, and then we go through field testing and form finalization and all of those other fun bits that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. And just so you know, the tests that your students take are made by educators like yourselves and industry professionals throughout the state of Ohio. And so today we're going to be talking about the WebXam calendar. We're going to be talking about WebXam updates for this year. We'll be talking about why uploads are an important part of the process rather than trying to have teachers or administrators enter students by hand. And then we'll discuss the actual upload process through a walkthrough. So hopefully that agenda works for everybody. We'll sort of do questions sort of at the end of each section. And then at the end of the session, we'll sort of open it up for questions on any topic. So, well, WebXam related anyway. So let's start with the WebXam calendar. So as I'm sure you know, we are in the WebXam pre-testing period. So that runs until the 4th of October, and there'll be a little break. And then we'll start getting into end of course and field testing on October 13th. So typically October, maybe for some semester students, they'll be testing toward the end of that month. But in a lot of cases, you might be using this time in October to do retakes for students who were in these courses last year and need to improve their score. And just a quick note, because it's come up in the tickets a few times, for retakes for students who have taken these tests in previous years, outside of field testing, they can take those tests in the same year again. So there'll be so if you have a student that tests on October 13th, they'll be able to test again after 30 days in November. Then we'll get into winter pre-testing. Field testing in IT and arts needs to be completed by 4/17/2026. Scores will be released and senior retakes open for those field tested forms on May 4th. And then the final testing deadline is on the 29th of May. Just other important dates that you should be aware of. The first one is the next in this series of users workshops, and there we'll be focusing on activation and proctoring. That'll be on October 7th, also at 10 a.m. And will be then the next important date, as we mentioned before, is that field test finalization date, which is May the 4th. Be with you. And then the end of year reports will be released on the 12th of June. So as you know, there's no pretesting in IT and arts and communications except in a few courses that didn't get rewritten this year. But for all intents and purposes, there's no pretesting in IT and arts. So just be aware of that. Most of those IT and arts tests are in field testing this school year. Students will be taking approximately 100 test questions instead of the typical 40. And you must test students before the field testing window closes on on April 17th. So the key thing to know there is a student who's graduating this year must take the field test in order to be able to participate in that retake window for field tests in May. They're just, even if they were, even if they tested in a previous year in that same course, they need to take that field test in order to be able to retake the test in May. So what you really need to be aware of for field testing is that those tests are a bit longer. So your students may require additional time to complete them. And so we just ask that you work with your districts to arrange for a longer period of time for testing purposes. So just keep an eye out and make a plan now for how you're going to do that testing and how that's going to work. The last thing I want to talk about in this phase is WebXam teacher test reviews. As you may know, teachers can review these assessments. They can review each assessment once per that test's life cycle. And the life cycle basically runs from the start of field testing until that test is rewritten and the next field testing process begins. So typically, it's somewhere between 5 and 7 years is the life cycle for a web exam assessment. Those dates are monthly sessions that are held at the at our Ohio State University offices at 1900 Kenny Road. Registration for those is $60 per registration. If you're interested, your district may also wish to host a session. If you do and you're interested, there are some rules and stuff associated with that. So feel free to contact us at support@webexam.org, or there is a page on our news.webexam.org site that covers that. All right, I'm just going to briefly go over what our web exam updates are going to look like, and then we'll do a live demo of how those updates work so you can sort of see them in process. Let me just check and see if are there any outstanding questions, or when will the field tests be available? Yep, okay, perfect. All right, thank you. So there are staff in the chat as well. Angie Stansel, who is another one of our web exam service delivery folks, as well as, I will mention, a recruiter for teachers who are interested in participating in the web exam item writing process. We are writing new tests for engineering and manufacturing this year. So if you have any questions about how teachers can participate in that, leave them in the chat. Angie will answer those. Or you can email our entire recruiting team at seat underscore recruiting, or is it seat dash recruiting? Seat dash recruiting, I apologize, at osu.edu. And seat is CETE. And then also in the chat is Dr. Bridget McHugh, who is the director of our assessment program. Okay. There she goes. Thank you, Angie. So let me talk about the WebXam updates we're going to go through really quickly. The first one is a new feature which allows you to update usernames for students and teachers if their last names have changed. This used to be something you'd have to contact WebXam support for, but now it's available to you without having to contact us if you wish. You're still welcome to contact us. We like to hear from you, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Next is a change to text-to-speech for activation purposes, and it allows you basically to enable text-to-speech for an entire testing session. And we'll talk about the sort of rules associated with that and the things you want to watch out for before doing that. But again, we want to sort of make sure that all the students who can have access to the text-to-speech option. Then we'll talk about some other changes to text-to-speech, specifically for students, and we'll show you what that looks like. Then we'll talk about some changes to the summary report, and lastly, some new fields in the testing report that you should be aware of. And so let me switch over and we'll start the live demo, hopefully. I'll log into our demonstration site here. Now. All right, so the first one I want to show you is how you can reset a student's username. So let's take, for example, this student here, Angelina Adams. And let's say that the student's name has changed for whatever reason. So you have now decided to go in and edit this user, and their name is now Huggins. And so once you change that last name, you'll see it's changed up here, Angelina Huggins, that there is now an option for you to reset that user's username. Now, this is available to administrative accounts only, and it's available for student accounts and for teacher accounts. I would stress, particularly if you're changing student or teacher account usernames, that you make sure the teachers know that you've done that. A lot of teachers, of course, have password managers they're using, and they'll need to update those password managers if you change their usernames. For students, that's less of an issue. You probably want to make sure that they're not activated to take a test at the time that you're changing their username. That could cause some confusion, but otherwise, you can click this reset password at any time. And when you do that, you'll see a screen like this where it's telling you, hey, you're going to reset the username for Angelina Huggins. Are you sure you want to do this? And you'll choose reset username. It'll tell you that that successfully happened. You can close this window. You'll update it, and now that that student's last name matches their username, you no longer have the option to reset that username. So that is the reset username process. The next thing I want to cover is text-to-speech activation for an entire test session. So I'm going to activate a test. I'm just going to pick a teacher here. We'll do a post-test, random program, random course. And what you'll notice in activation, you'll be able to see this right now. Maybe you've already noticed that there's a text-to-speech option that's hidden right below where you choose an activation start time. And clicking that means that any student in this test that you select to be a part of this test session will have the text-to-speech option enabled if you check this box. And so you should only enable this in a situation where the students have headphones available so that they're not causing a disruption. I'd probably avoid doing this in a classroom setting because it would be difficult to manage. So consider only doing this in a situation where you're in like a testing center or a testing room specifically designed to support this kind of activity. And just be aware that this won't have any effect on students with text-to-speech already enabled through an accommodation. So yeah, if you choose every student in this list and you activate that test, they will all have text-to-speech available. Yeah, that is correct. Everyone can use text-to-speech if you enable this option. There's no specific accommodation required if you check this box. So let me show you how that is going to look for your students. I'll log out and log in as a student. Not now. And we'll just take the demo test to show you. Right. So as before, this microphone option has always been here, and this will read out the entire question for students. It'll read out the STEM as we call it, and then also each of the possible responses. What's changed really is how a student can choose to read each individual option. It used to be they would click on the text and that would do it. But we found that could cause a problem because it also selects the correct answer. So instead, they click on this little microphone here. And that microphone may look a little different based on the browser that you're using. And then also be aware that if your student is using Spanish, if you're using Google Chrome, which I'm not for this purpose, it will read out that translation as well, and it will read it out in actual Spanish. Just be aware of that. All right, so I am going to move on from that feature. I'll log out, log back in as demo.run demo, and move on to the summary report. So the change to the summary report is that now instead of selecting a month and a year, you can sort of define a custom date range that works for you. Like if you're doing like a weekly report of testing in your career center or district, you can do so, or a weekly report, yeah, you can do that now. And you can choose either one or both of these options or none of them, whatever works for your needs. Yeah, I am a big fan of this as well. It was suggested, I won't name them, but somebody in this users workshop suggested that. and we are very grateful for the suggestion. So let's do a sample here. Let's say I wanted to look at all the testing that occurred in the first few weeks in May last year. And so when you run this, you'll see that, oh, okay. And there were 4 students that took this fitness and evaluation assessment with this teacher in those first few weeks of May. Now, if I only wanted to specify a date since, I can specify the 15th, and I can clear this out. I'm just clicking on each part and hitting the backspace button or the delete button. And so this will show me all the testing since May 15th until the end of last school year for this demo career center. And so again, you'll notice that now, hey, the same teacher also gave this test to 1 student in that time frame. And so I really like starting with the summary report, because you have some of that additional power, but also because you can just click on this little microscope right here and run that testing report based on those options. And so now you'll see, here's this 1 student, Trevor Williams, that took that assessment with that teacher in that time frame. And so that brings us up to another feature, which is the 3 new fields in the testing report. And so those are available and visible when you do the show additional details checkbox. And again, this was suggested by a user. I'm not sure if that person is in chat or not, but you'll see 3 new fields: times taken, times proficient, times advanced. And what these are telling you is at the time the student completed this test, how many times now has a student taken that test? How many times were they proficient? How many times were they advanced? So that way you can start to do some reporting as you export out these results on how many tests it was taking your students to reach that proficient status, maybe as an average across the Career Center or for a specific teacher in a specific program, anything like that. And so this student, this was the first time they had taken that test, and they were proficient but not advanced. So those 3 new fields are available to you. And that, I believe, concludes our new features. So we welcome your questions in the chat. I love the new data option. Yes. So the big microphone to the right, no, the big microphone to the right will read both the stem as well as each of the possible responses. If the student clicks on the language of the stem itself, that user or that student will be read only the stem. Can you go back to the text-to-speech screen so I can do a screenshot for staff learning? Absolutely. So do you mean the one in the activation window? I asked the right account. Nope. Sorry. Let me get the right account. Post test. Course. Ground maintenance. So was it this window that you wanted to see? Oh, the sample question. Okay. Well, if anyone needs a screenshot of this, here it is. And we'll also be posting this on YouTube, like I said, so you can go and grab screenshots as needed from there as well. But we'll also show you this window one more time. So that is this window. So You can't hear it, but if you could, the yellow highlighted part is the part that's being read. So you saw it read the stem, and now it's reading each responses when you use the big microphone. When you click on just the stem, it will read just that stem. And then in order to read a particular response, particular possible response, just click on that microphone. And that's just because students, I think at this point, are used to clicking on the text next to a radio button in order to select it. So we didn't want that to sort of be doing multiple things and cause confusion for students. All right, let me stop sharing that. And now I will hand it over to my colleague Brock Hertzfeld to talk about the importance of uploads and uploads. Brock?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be sharing some screenshots, walking through some of the rostering upload process and other things that may be pertinent. So what the screenshots are going to encompass is what an administrator would see, and I'd like to touch base on that. So WebXam has two type of administrator accounts: a district testing coordinator account that can by default see everything in WebXam for your district, as well as regular administrator accounts that can be added specifically only to programs. So if you choose to, you can have somebody who may be an administrator but can only work with certain programs versus district testing coordinators that are going to be able to see everything. And with that, district testing coordinators can be very critical to your district's performance and the ease of use for teachers using WebXam. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about are things that district testing coordinators can do throughout the year to make WebXam run smoothly. So there's several processes that happen throughout the school year, and if done in a timely manner, it can benefit the teachers and the students with everything being set up correctly before a teacher needs to give a test. Some of the things that come up, you can either consider at the end of a school year or at the beginning before you roster students for the new year, would be promoting your student grade levels. Or archiving your students. So promoting the student grade levels is where you're going to be making sure that the student accounts have the correct grades on them. That can be done in the interface where you'd go in and you'd select all your students and then select an action to perform on those students, which would be to set their grade level or promote their grade level, which would bump them up one grade, or you could even drop them. That's kind of a manual process and can be prone to errors because you have to specify exactly what students you're identifying. What I would consider recommending is that you think of making sure that all of your data is synced in WebXam from your student information system by pulling a full roster report for any student who's enrolled in a CTE or FCS course. And that is kind of one of the big parts of rostering students, is making sure that you have produced a report that you're going to upload to us. And I'll talk the difference between manually entering in students versus our roster upload. But we do feel that the rostering up with a bulk roster upload file where you encompass all of the students that are enrolled is a much preferred way to make sure that everything is accurate in WebXam. And you're not going to run into issues where teachers can't see students or other things. So a good time to bump the student grades would be either right after the end of the year when students have graduated, or right before you do your rostering if you're going to do it manually. Additionally, archiving students, that's a good time to do it. At the end of the school year, archiving in WebXam will hide students from the default views so that teachers aren't having clutters of old students that they're no longer teaching. So we'll dive into that a little bit more as I show the interface. The next thing that you want to think about in the yearly process to bootstrap the year is adding your new teachers. So if you have any teachers that have left, you might want to consider archiving their accounts. Or if you have new teachers, it's critical that you add that teacher account in before you begin rostering your students. When you roster your students, it's going to make a connection between the student and the program and the teacher. And if that teacher account isn't added in, you're not going to be able to have that connection happen. Again, we'll show a little bit more about that process as we go on. Next thing to consider is updating current programs if subject codes have changed. So what that means is your district is going to have a CTE 26 that they've submitted for approval to have an approved program from ODEW. Once that happens, generally over the summer, we get a list of all the new programs that we load into WebExam. So we know that you have an approved program, where's the location, what pathway it is, and then we're able to use that data when students are rostered to make a connection between the student and what program they're in. So in the program screen, which again we'll show in a bit, it's very helpful to go through maybe at the beginning of the year, walk through all your programs and look at the data and make sure it's all correct and make any corrections that need to happen before you do your student rostering. And then next, we're just going to talk about the different ways that you can get your student data in. So here's a screenshot of if you are going to be adding in teachers. So you have a new teacher that comes in, you're going to be able to go in WebExam underneath the teacher menu and select new. You will be filling out their information and adding their programs in, their email. When you create the user, the teacher will receive an email to their email address. So you want to make sure you do have that email address correct. That email will tell them how to set their password. Something that we do see frequently that you want to be aware of is districts will sometimes create teacher accounts before the actual email address has been activated. And that will cause that email that goes to them to create their password to not show up until they actually get their account. And it will have already bounced back to us. So you might want to think about how long does it take for your school district to create that email, and maybe wait to create their account after that happens. Or if you do go ahead and create that email and they don't receive, or I'm sorry, if you do go ahead and create that account and they don't receive that email, you can always send them to webexam.org. And there's a link that says forgot password. They can trigger an email to be sent to them, a new email to be sent to them to set their password. So this is just the onboarding process to get a new teacher account in. Next thing we're going to look at is the programs menu. So you've gotten your teachers in, you know that they all have accounts. In the sidebar menu, there's a programs link. This lists your districts, all your districts approved programs. We have a bunch of demo programs listed here. What you can do is to click the green plus icon to expand out your program. And I kind of recommend occasionally going through potentially the beginning of the year, clicking on those green plus icons and just reviewing what you have set to your programs. Some critical information that you're going to want to look at are going to be the tests. WebExam does not know what tests your district has chosen to be part of your program. You need to specify that. Additionally, we don't know who the teachers are. So you need to add in those teachers. In this example, we have a teacher assigned and we have tests assigned. If you have a brand new program, an administrator would need to go in here and edit that program to specify that teacher and those tests before you'd roster your students. The reason you need to do that before you roster your students is the upload process looks for the teacher ID of a teacher on the program, as well as it looks for the location of the program and the pathway of the program. And it uses that to map the students to any program that matches. So we need to have those bits in place before you roster, or the students will not be matched to the program that they're supposed to be added to. So to edit this, we've already clicked the green plus icon and expanded out, and then you see that there's an edit button down below. When you click on that, you can make changes. Additionally, if you're a district testing coordinator and you want to limit who can make edits to data inside of a program, there isn't a restrictions option. We have a little bit of information in our documentation that talks about what you can do. You can limit teachers to, say, only be able to activate tests instead of editing students. If you really want to have centralized control, it's something that some districts do where they have strong DTCs who really want to manage the data, make sure it's all perfect, and then just have the teachers do things like just be able to activate the tests. And talking about activating the test, The tests that are assigned to a program, only those tests will be able to be activated by the teachers. In years past, WebXam would let teachers activate any test that was inside of a pathway. ODE creates somewhere between 10 and 15 different courses for every pathway. So teachers had a lot of options. Unfortunately, that led to some issues where teachers would select the wrong course and give the wrong test. So administrators going in and managing this to select the correct courses really cuts down on accidental wrong tests being given. A lot of the other duties that you might be performing as an administrator are going to be underneath the secondary students menu. So this is where you gain access to seeing all of your students, finding things out about individual students, editing data on individual students, as well as it's where you access the upload menu to roster students. So here I'm showing what, after you click on secondary students, there's the list menu or the list menu option that will show this page. It's going to show a table of all the students that your account is able to see. Above that, you're going to see a filter section. So if you have, in this case, we have almost 6,000 students listed. You can filter down based on different criteria to only show the students that you're interested in. A lot of times you might be looking for just one particular student where you can search by their first and last name, or you could search by their username or their SSID if you really want to hone in and get that exact student. Once you then can see the student, you can interact with that account and do different things to it. There's a couple other pieces that I want to quickly talk about that can be very helpful. This menu system has a bulk actions drop-down menu that will allow you to perform specific actions on multiple students at a time. That can be very helpful. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit. There's also the show archived option. So if you're looking for a student and they're not showing, one thing that you might want to be aware of is that if we find a match for a student that you're filtering for, like their first and last name, they may not show up if their account is set to archive. You can always see archive students, like basically recover them and expose them as being visible by using the show archive button that's just above the table. Very handy to know. We do pop up a menu that will warn you if we found a match, but they're archived. It's a little blue box that'll tell you if you want to, you can click a button or click the show archive button and it'll let you see that student. So here's an example of going and finding an account and then being able to look at the data that's underlying that account. So first, we would go underneath secondary students, click on list. The second step would be to look for that green circle with a plus icon. Anywhere you see that, if you click that icon, it's saying there's additional hidden data that you can expose. So once we've clicked that green plus icon, you'll see that the data will expand out and you'll be able to see information about the student. In this particular demo student account, there isn't as much data as you may frequently see for your students. So when you're looking at this, and a student that has tested, you will also see additional information about the tests that they've taken, the dates that they've taken them. You can see who the teacher was that they were activated under. You can see their scores. So while WebXam has a very powerful section of reports, if you're trying to hone in on some particular data about just one student, sometimes it can be very helpful to go underneath the secondary students list menu and just look for that one student's account and then expand it out and look there. It'll really focus on just what that kid has as opposed to the reports, which are usually more focused on seeing a group of students at a time. There's also the edit button that is available. Clicking the edit button will let you modify the data that is there for the student. This is something that you might want to think about who is going to be doing this. I've had calls from some school districts that are concerned that people are making edits that aren't correct if teachers are going in there. So that's kind of the debate about who is managing the data. Do you want to have a strong district testing coordinator account that is really managing the rostering of the data to make sure it's as accurate as possible? Or if that doesn't happen, in a vacuum like that, you'll often have the teachers that are trying to fix things or trying to create accounts. And that leads to some issues where they might not have accurate data. So they're trying to create something that they might accidentally have bad data in. So it's something to have a discussion about at the district. This is an example of something that is very helpful to do at the beginning of the school year. So what we're looking at here are the steps that can be taken to archive students in the cleanest, I feel, most straightforward manner. So before you roster students, you might want to make sure that kids that are no longer in your program have their accounts archived to just clean up everything. And that could be students who have left a program, could be mid-year. You could do this for just one student at a time, or at the end of the school year after students have graduated. So either directly in the late spring, early summer, or just before fall, right before you do your final roster upload. This is something that's a good practice to do. So to get there, we're going to go on the secondary students list. We're going to see the list of all the students. The second step is we have the the grade graduation year filter option. There you can choose the year previous where students were marked as graduating that year. That will filter down the list of students that are exposed to just the students who were graduated. Then step 3 is down below. You have the option to change from just seeing 10 students at a time. You can go ahead and select all. That'll make sure that WebXam is exposing every single kid that was marked as graduating that year. Then step 4, if you check mark the very first box that is in the header row, when you check mark that, it will select every student that is visible. So we're going to place a check mark for all those kids. We've now selected them. And then 5, there's the bulk actions menu. In that bulk actions menu, when you click on it, it will offer different options. One of those is going to be archive. We also offer things like change the grade level there. You can unarchive, you can archive, and several other things that you might want to perform across different accounts. Once you select archive, if you click apply, all those students will then be set to be archived. And the status menu over on the right where it says enabled would change to say archived. Those students then, in the future, when you'd go to the secondary students list, would not show up by default unless you chose to click the button that says show archive. So again, it's taking all the student accounts that teachers aren't going to be interested in anymore because the student's no longer attending school and hiding them by default to just make things cleaner. One thing that's very advantageous to do this in early fall or early summer is when you archive kids, if you accidentally archived a kid that you shouldn't have, the rostering process, if you do a complete roster upload, will find any student that was marked as archived and it will bring them back out of archive and they'll be visible. So just something to note, you can be very aggressive in doing your archiving. We have had some schools who have had lots of years of data that was not very accurate, and they've chosen to archive all of their kids and then do a complete roster upload to bring back only the kids that were actively enrolled. It's fairly safe to do that, but you just want to understand what you're doing if you're going to be aggressive and archive all of your kids. If you haven't archived for a long time, you can also choose to go back in previous years, even further back for the graduation year. I believe we have data for graduation year at probably about 6 years in the past that you could go back and make sure all of those accounts are archived. So this next menu that we're looking at is if you need to add a student. I talk about this with caution. There's a lot of accounts or teachers that have gone in and added students using this menu. What I really encourage this menu to be used for is if you have a student who comes in mid-year or you need to just have a special case where you have a couple of kids that you need to create their accounts. The downside of this is access is given to different levels, teachers and administrators. But if the teachers are using it, we're concerned that the SSID is accurate and all the other student information is accurate here. So this is a very powerful tool to get work done when you need to create an account where you just go in and specify one. But because you're manually entering the data, it has a higher likelihood that you might type something wrong. And if an SSID is entered in wrong for a student, we will report their testing with that SSID. and your district might not get credit for that student because the ID isn't right, and EMIS will not know how to match that to the student that was enrolled with you. So you want to very carefully make sure that the data that's entered in here is accurate. It's just a word of warning. So next we're going to look at the bulk roster upload process. This is what we encourage school districts to focus on. We know that some small school districts might not have as many staff members to manage doing bulk roster uploads, and they may choose to do individual account creation because their classes are very small. Even in that case, we do recommend, if possible, to have an administrator who has good access to the student information system take over the rostering of the students so that you can try and focus on pulling a report with the data out of your SIS and then uploading that, which tends to be much more accurate as far as getting the student data loaded. So to bulk upload students, there's the secondary student menu again, and we're going to go look at upload. The very first page that you see when you click upload is going to directly have a form that lets you choose a file and upload it. So to find out more about what that file is and how to use it, there is the Get Roster Upload Template and Definition link that is above. When we go there, we'll have a table that displays all of the data that is in that file. So the very first row, the field, those are all the different columns that you'll have in the spreadsheet that we offer for download, as well as is that column required, a description of what the data looks like. We give examples of what they would be, the different options that can be put into that column. So it's a good reference to look at that. The next image here is an actual screenshot of the download Excel file that we have. So the way that we get data into WebXam is download this Excel file. You're going to pull a report from your SIS system, and you're going to want to populate the columns with the data that you've pulled. We have some example rows of what it looks like, the first two rows there that have those students. You can leave those in, it's not a big deal, but it does give you a visual idea of what your data should look like. You want to make sure that the Excel file is not manipulated and doesn't have additional columns added in or anything of that nature. You really want to take your data and as cleanly as you can, just paste it into this file. If you start manipulating things in this file, you might have different issues that happen. Sometimes people will try and sort, and if you sort in the wrong order, you might actually get the first and last names off or the SSID, and suddenly you've got names of students with wrong SSID. So you want to be just very careful about how you're loading the data in. I recommend when you load it in, then go pick a couple of students, look through it, and make sure that everything is correct. Maybe check a couple of different places in the file. Just have a sanity check of what you've done to make sure it's accurate. Once you've created this file and saved it, then you can go back to that form and upload it using the link that is there. A special note, so WebXam can take the Excel files. There is also an export feature in Progress Book if you have that as your SIS system. You might want to look into that. There's an export to WebXam feature that lets you directly choose a CTE program and export a file directly out of that, so you don't have to write your own report to get your data out. And WebXam will take that file directly with no manipulation. You don't need to use the Excel file. So users that have that, I think I've done a Google search for a Dazzle export to WebXam. There's a document that they have that you can look that up. For other SIS systems, when I've talked to people, they just say they go in and run like an ad hoc report to get the data that they need, and then they populate it into a file, the Excel file here, and then they upload that. So this is an example of after uploading a file. So I made a file with some dummy data in it, and then I uploaded it so I could get an example of some of the errors. What WebXam does is when you've created an Excel file and you've uploaded it to our system, we will scan it for errors. So we're going to check to see if we have any logical errors that we can detect that we know that does not make sense, and we will stop the process of importing the data. We'll then show you what the errors are, and we'll give you some information about how you want to correct it. The process with that is that if you've been told that you have an error, you're going to want to go back to your original file, look at it, determine what that error is, make the corrections. Once you feel like you've solved all those issues, you can upload the file again, WebExam will scan again for errors and report anything. And we're going to have different layers. There's informational, warning, and then there's errors. With an error, you cannot proceed. You will not be able to submit that file until that error has been solved. Warnings you'll frequently see, and that's going to be things that we think you might want to know about. It could be a problem, but we're going to let you decide if it's something that is a problem. And what can happen there is something like you've swapped the first and last name. And what we'll do is WebExam will look with the SSID into the system, find the account, and it'll compare the data. And if we notice that something's swapped and it doesn't quite make sense, we'll just give you a warning saying, hey, this student's name's changed or their location is changing, like you're importing a kid from another school. We'll tell you about that, but it might be completely logical what is happening, and you can choose to ignore those and proceed and actually process a file with warnings. There's options to just view the errors and the warnings. Some information here, like the location is not valid. That would mean I'm going through a couple of these. The location is not found in WebExam, so we're going to say that the IRN number that you uploaded is not accurate. The next message is kind of common. It's a little bit difficult to understand unless you know what it means. The no matching program in building with teacher. What that's going to mean is that the file includes an IRN number, pathway, and teacher ID that doesn't match any program that's in your district. Therefore, we can't assign the student to a program. So you're going to want to go back and make sure that the data that you have in the upload file matches a teacher and a program with their IRN and the pathway. Once those are set up, that student would be able to be assigned to that pathway based off of that data. The next error there, teacher license ID was not found. This could be a case where you've tried to upload a list of students to a teacher, but that teacher doesn't have an account in WebExam. So you'd want to go back, make sure that that teacher account has been created and they've been added to the correct programs. So some of those errors, once you've kind of looked at them, figured out where your problem's at, corrected it, re-upload your file, those errors will start going down until you've resolved them all. And once that happens, you'll be able to scroll down to the bottom and click a button to submit the data. WebExam will immediately pull it in. Usually takes just under a minute for a not too large of a file. Once it's pulled in, it becomes available immediately. So that kind of wraps up the things that I wanted to cover. And if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to ask them of any of the content that we've offered today.
Thank you, Brock. There were some questions in the chat that I want specifically to cover, mainly around archiving students. So some of the career centers and folks have mentioned that where they're sharing students with the home district, there's a little bit of confusion about what happens about that student getting archived in one place, which also archives them in the other, and that causing a problem. I wanted to answer that for everybody, that we're actively looking for a solution to that problem. I think we recognize that that has become more common. We would just say, avoid archiving students until they've graduated, but we do understand that that's sort of a common process, and you might think, oh, okay, my student is done with my program, so I'm going to archive them now. And sort of get that. So we'll come up with a solution that will at least sort of minimize that problem. I've been looking into that for a few months. I have some ideas, and we'll be doing some testing on that soon. But I did want to sort of mention that because that came up a few times in the chat. There's one user who asked a question here, Brock. Is it too late to adjust a student's grades? If particularly, let's say a student's already taken a few pretests or not, is it too late to adjust their grade? And the short answer for that question is no.
Yeah, mainly the thing about the grades is it's generally just used in filtering in most places. The grade level can be confusing when people are running reports and they select a grade, they're not seeing their kids. If you didn't roster the students or you didn't manually go in and change those grades, the report is going to obey whatever you set it to. If it doesn't match the account because the data is wrong, then people get confused why some results aren't coming back. Um, Again, that's why I kind of recommend moving towards central district testing coordinators who are rostering every student that's enrolled to get those graduation years and grade levels set accurately. The manual process of going in and modifying grades is probably pretty tedious, and I feel like you're still going to have a lot of errors. So the more focus on we're just going to run a big report, get everybody in, and something that I didn't talk about earlier is you can run roster uploads more than once. Whenever you feel the data has changed enough that you want to republish your student information, WebExam will look for the SSID, find an account in WebExam, and take whatever you've provided to us, and we will update the account with that. If there is no SSID found in WebExam, we consider that a new student account, and we will create the account with whatever data you provided to us. So once you understand how to build your report to get your data quickly, it can be pretty smooth to load that into WebExam and make sure that your data is always well synced with us.
Yeah, and then an additional question in that regard, is this just for students that have graduated or transferred to a different school? Yeah, I'd probably say really if they've graduated is what you want to focus on. If they've transferred to a different school in a different state, that might be a thing. But I would say if they're transferring within Ohio, maybe just disable those accounts instead of archiving them so that it's easier for the new school to pick up that student if they are also going to be taking career tech or FCS programming there. Uh,
Uh, to promote the bulk uploading process there again is if a student is archived somewhere and they've moved into your district, if you do that, it will detect the student and move them smoothly to your location. Um, where if you're doing the manual process and you're moving a student from a different location, it's a little bit more involved to have that student move from one location to yours.
yeah, and so then the last question is just, or not really a question, it's a comment. Just a note of something that seemed to work well for me. I archive all of my students in the system, then uploaded a file for this year. And that is something we're seeing a few districts do. It's a little bit risky. So you certainly want to make sure that your data is good, but that is something we are seeing a few districts do where they're just archiving everybody and then uploading everybody after that. And the upload, as Brock was saying, you can do as many times as you want, and it will unarchive that student as part of the upload process. So yeah, that's okay to do. You just want to be really careful and make sure you have all that data.
Yeah,
Um,
when I talk to districts about that, I just say if you do it, you want to make sure that your report that you're pulling covers everybody that you want to see. That's the big risk is that you'd archive kids, you'd roster students, and then some of them would be left behind because your report didn't cover everybody. But other than that, if you're aware of that kind of downside, if you missed a student, it should be safe to do.
Wonderful. Just real quick before we continue answering questions, it is 11 o'clock, so if you have somewhere else you have to be, we understand and we apologize that we're running a little bit over. Uh, we'll continue answering questions here, and then, like I said, we'll post this video to YouTube if you want to take a look at the last few minutes. Deanna asks, Deanna asks, give a couple examples of how to use tags. So, tags are a really interesting feature, and sort of Dan talks a little bit about this. Let me talk about where tags are used. They can be used for filtering student lists, and that it can be particularly useful in an activation setting. So you'll notice if you go through the activation process and you get to the end, you can filter that list of students down to students just with a particular tag. And that's particularly useful for FCS instructors who might have 150, 200 students, maybe more, throughout the course of a day that they're seeing. So having, maybe you have 2026, global foods, first period as a tag. Um, then you can just filter down to those first period students and activate that test for those students, change that filter and move on from there. So that is probably the major use of tags that we were considering when we added that feature. We have started to add the tags into reports as well. So if you're looking to do reports on a subset of students in your program or in your that are taking your tests, you can use the tags to do that as well. I think the outcome report has that right now. I'm not sure about the other reports, but certainly the outcome report does. Um, so I hope that answers that question, Deanna. So if we have a student that leaves us as a JVS, I'm careful not to archive those students. I think that's a good plan. Archiving should be a situation where we think the student isn't going to be taking any more career technical tests anywhere in the state of Ohio. I think just to sort of talk tangentially about that, I think the solution we'll likely be implementing will be something like if you attempt as a teacher to archive a student account and that student is in a program that is not yours, then it will only remove that student from your program instead of archiving them altogether. So the logic for that gets a little bit complicated, so we're sort of working on that. But that's probably where we're going to end up with as a solution. So just so you're aware of what we're thinking, and if you have any thoughts about other ways to do that, we're happy to listen. I wish students could be assigned to two schools. Well, yeah, I come and go on this one because they sort of can be if they're taking programs in two schools. Uh, that sort of allows them to sort of be in both those locations. That means that the sort of end of year reporting goes off to each district as appropriate. Allowing students to have multiple locations, I think that's on our list of things that we'd like to do as well. It's just a bit complicated because the sort of one student, one location thing is really wired deeply into WebXam. So it will take a little bit of time for us to unravel, if that's a fair enough word to use, Brock. Um, Unravel how all that sort of works together. But we will get there eventually. I or we'll just get rid of locations altogether and we won't fight it. Um, Anyway, one or the other. So I think that's all the questions. Like I said, we'll stick around for a few more minutes for questions. But like I said, if you have to go off to another meeting or off to lunch, whatever time it is, we really thank you all for being part of this process. Again, the next users workshop is on the 7th of October at 10 a.m. and that will be focused on uh, activations and proctoring. I'm going to bring up the slides real quickly. Be sure to check that WebXam calendar. And again, if you have programs that are engineering and manufacturing programs at your district, or if you're teaching one, please encourage your teachers to participate in item writing. Item writing starts next week. So be sure to email seat-recruiting at osu.edu. Check the item writing calendar and interest form, I think, that Angie posted earlier in the chat. Maybe if I ask really nicely, Angie can post that again.
I'm getting
Yes.
ready to post it again. Give me just a hot second, Richard. I'll
Um,
also put the item writing calendar in here. As Richard stated earlier, we are writing currently for engineering and manufacturing, and we are looking for all levels of teachers from teachers who are in their first year to teachers who are in their last year, headed towards that lovely thing we all would like to see eventually called retirement. Um, If you are interested in joining us, we are hosting all of our workshops virtually. We've been doing virtual formats since 2020 via Zoom. Um, this allows you to stay in your locations. You no longer have to travel to come see us, which does not require a substitute because all workshops take place from 3 to 5 p.m. and which saves you time because you do not fall behind in your classrooms. And the payment that we offer could likely go directly to you because we are no longer taking your time during the school day. So if you have any more questions with regards to item writing, please feel free to reach out to me. As Richard stated earlier, my email is seat-recruiting@osu.edu. And I will answer any questions that you may have.
And while we're waiting for that, Barb did ask a question. Is there any way to add accommodations to the sort of testing tickets student slips that have the username and access code after activation? Yes. I think I promised to do that last year and I didn't get it done, so I apologize for that. But yes, we can add that. We will do it. ASAP, I promise. And likely that will just be like a one-letter code, the same one that's used in the upload process. So that will be coming. I do apologize for that. All right, well, again, thank you all very much. We'll hang out here again for a few more minutes, but it's been a pleasure to see you, and hopefully we'll see you all again in a month.